Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are covering something that feels, well, it feels less like a historical analysis and more like the third act of a very tense stage play.
Yeah, it really does.
We are talking about unscripted history. Usually when you look at the British monarchy or any high-level statecraft, really, you are looking at a finished product. It is polished. It is choreographed.
Right.
Every single hand wave is rehearsed.
It has to be. I mean, the monarchy, by definition, is an institution of continuity. It relies entirely on the illusion that nothing ever really changes, even when it absolutely does.
Exactly.
If you see the gears turning, the magic usually fades.
Right. But today we are looking at a stack of sources, reports, eyewitness accounts, and some very specific analysis regarding a moment where the Giddies didn't just grind.
It completely jammed.
They completely jammed. We are going back to early 2025 to a blessing service at Westminster Abbey.
Which, on paper, should have been the most boring event of the year.
Right. It was billed as this routine display of stability. King Charles III had been dealing with those health scares throughout 2024.
Yes.
So this was supposed to be the we are fine carry-on moment.
Yeah.
But according to the material we have here, it turned into what some observers are calling the Westminster fracture.
Is a fascinating case study because it wasn't a scandal in the traditional sense.
Mm-hmm.
No one gave a disastrous interview. No one was caught on a hot mic.
Nothing like that.
This entire shift in power happened through silence, through body language, and one very specific, very unauthorized entrance.
So that is our mission today. We are going to unpack this incident for you. We aren't just looking at the pageantry. We are analyzing a total breakdown of unity between the King, Queen Camilla, and the Prince and Princess of Wales.
And we're going to look at how this one single morning in the Abbey effectively shifted the center of gravity of the British monarchy.
To understand why this mattered, you really have to start with the setting. You cannot disconnect the event from the room.
No, you can't. Westminster Abbey isn't just a church. It represents 1,000 years of this is how we do things.
The sources describe the atmosphere inside as heavy. It says the service was meant to be a display of tradition, restraint, and symbolism.
And you have the key players in position.
Yeah.
King Charles, who was actively trying to project that he is still in charge despite the health issues.
Right.
You have Prince William, who the report specifically describes as composed to the point of distance.
That is such a specific description for William, composed to the point of distance.
It is. It suggests he was already in a defensive posture before anything even happened, like he was bracing for something.
And then you have Princess Catherine.
Yes.
The source notes she was radiating quiet authority. Now, this was right after her return to public life, so all eyes were on her anyway. The public is watching her every move.
So the stage is set for a tableau of unity.
Mm-hmm.
The king, the heir, the family. But then you had the visual anomaly.
The thing that shouldn't be there.
Or rather, the thing that wasn't there.
That empty chair.
Right. The empty chair.
Yeah.
Because in any normal family, an empty chair just means someone is stuck in traffic or they couldn't find parking.
Sure.
But in royal protocol, an empty chair is a scream and a fundamental breach of contract.
Because the king and queen consort are a matched set.
Exactly. They enter together. That is the visual shorthand for the crown is whole. By sitting there with that empty space beside him, Charles was already projecting vulnerability.
So the service is underway. The organ music is echoing off those ancient stone walls. Everyone is tense because they know the king is frail. And then
The disruption.
the source describes it as an uninvited sound.
The great wooden doors of the Abbey, they didn't just creak open. The report says they swung with urgent force.
And in walks Queen Camilla, but let's look at the sensory details here because this is what makes the report feel so cinematic.
It really puts you in the room.
It focuses on the sound of her heels striking the marble, too quickly, too loudly.
That auditory detail is crucial to understand the breach. Think about the Abbey. It is vast. It is cavernous. Sound carries.
Right.
A fast clicking walk implies a rush. It implies a lack of composure. It immediately contradicts the exact message of restraint the palace was trying to send.
Because a queen doesn't rush.
No. A queen arrives, and then the event starts.
But she didn't just walk fast, she walked wrong. The report mentions a discreet route had been prepared for her.
Yes, the side aisle.
Right. Presumably to slip her in quietly if she was running late. But she ignored it entirely. She took the central path.
This is where the protocol breach becomes an active power play.
Mm-hmm.
The central path, the nave, is the processional route.
It is the main stage.
Exactly. It is the path a monarch takes at a coronation. It is the path of the bride at a royal wedding. It is a path of absolute center stage attention.
So by taking that route,
She wasn't just trying to get to her seat. She was claiming the room. And remember where William and Catherine are sitting?
right up front.
They're near the front, guarding the king's space, effectively. By storming down that center line, she was physically breaching the sphere of influence that protects the heir.
The source actually calls it an invasion. It says the air in the room tightened. The clergy hesitated.
Which is wild because these are men who are used to absolute order.
Right, they do this every day.
And they just froze.
Right.
It is the shock of the new. They were witnessing a script being rewritten in real time. And this is where we really have to look at the reaction, or rather, the lack of reaction from the front row.
Let's talk about Prince William first. The source says he stood unmoving, posture flawless.
But notice the tell in the report. It highlights a tightening of his jaw.
That is the only sign of stress, just the jaw.
That is the discipline we were talking about. Imagine the internal screaming going on in his head right then.
Yeah.
His father is frail, the institution is vulnerable, and his stepmother is making a public scene.
Yeah.
But he knows that if he turns around, if he reacts, if he even scowls, he validates the chaos.
He becomes part of the drama.
Exactly. By staying absolutely still, he highlights her movement. He makes her the anomaly.
It is almost like a military standoff. He held the line.
Precisely. He held the line.
And then there is Catherine. The source mentions she actually sensed the uneven breathing of the queen coming up behind her. That is such an intimate, uncomfortable detail.
It shows you how close the physical intrusion actually was. She is right on top of them.
In Catherine's response to this, a brief, precise glance.
Not a glare, not a smile, just an acknowledgement.
It is almost colder than a glare, isn't it?
Much colder. It is a dismissal. It says, I see you, and I am not moved by you.
But the disruption didn't stop at the seating. This is the part of the report that I found the most shocking. The act of defiance during the invocation.
This really is the climax of the incident. The Archbishop is midway through the prayer. The room is supposed to be completely silent.
Right.
And Camilla reportedly reaches out toward sacred objects on the altar or perhaps near the king. The source is a bit ambiguous on the exact item, but very clear on the intent. She overstepped a physical and spiritual line reserved only for the sovereign and his heir.
And she spoke.
Low, urgent words to the clergy. It fractured the rhythm of the prayer. Silence fell exactly where there should have been continuity.
Okay, we have to pause and ask the big question here. Why? This is Queen Camilla.
Right.
She has spent decades rehabilitating her image. She went from being the other woman to the queen consort. She knows the game better than anyone. Why would she blow it up like this?
The source material offers a fascinating psychological profile on this. It suggests this wasn't just confusion or lateness. It was a desperate struggle for relevance.
Relevance. But she is the queen. How much more relevant can you get?
She is the consort. And since Queen Elizabeth II died in 2022, there has been a vacuum. The source argues that Camilla has been trying to define her role, trying to avoid fading into the background.
Especially as Charles got sicker.
Yes. She wanted to be seen as a co-ruler, a partner on equal footing.
So this whole this interruption was a bid for visibility.
It was a bid to show she was essential, to show she could take charge of a room. But she massively miscalculated the nature of royal power. She thought visibility being loud, being present, taking control physically equaled authority. But in that specific setting, authority comes from stillness. It comes from dignity. By rushing, by disrupting conduities, she didn't look powerful.
She looked panicked.
Completely panicked. And it forced King Charles to do something he has famously avoided his entire life.
He had to choose.
He had to choose between his personal loyalty to his wife and his duty to the institution.
The report calls this the pivot point.
It is the moment the history books will focus on. Charles looks at her. He sees the unmistakable loss of control. He sees the humiliation of the moment playing out in front of the clergy and his heir. And he makes a choice.
The description of his movement here is very specific. It says he moved with deliberate certainty, and then he reached for a prop, a crown.
Now, this wasn't the massive St. Edward's crown. It was a smaller symbolic crown, used specifically for the blessing. But the source says it was heavy with promise.
And instead of handing it to Camilla or even acknowledging her presence, he advances. He walks toward William and Catherine.
This creates the tableau, the visual image that changes the entire narrative from that day forward. You have the king, the heir, and the heir's wife, standing together.
Bound by duty. And Camilla.
Isolated. The source says she stood frozen across the aisle.
That is a brutal image. The king and the future are on one side. The consort is completely alone on the other.
It is the exact moment, years of careful maneuvering dissolved. The message was crystal clear. Authority resides here with the bloodline and with the disciplined.
It does not reside with the person making a scene regardless of their title.
Exactly.
So the ceremony ends. The public sees this slightly odd moment. Maybe the press runs a story about her being late. But behind the scenes, the report says the gates closed at Buckingham Palace, but the machinery went into absolute overdrive.
This is where we leave the emotional drama in the Abbey and get into the cold, hard, operational shift. The source calls it the soft regency.
It describes Charles's response to Camilla as cold distancing.
Because Charles is a pragmatist at his core. He viewed this incident as a fundamental breach of trust. He couldn't trust her to hold the script anymore. So he used the ultimate weapon of the monarchy, the diary.
A schedule.
If you aren't on the schedule, you do not exist in the royal world. Camilla's public presence was drastically reduced almost overnight.
Balcony appearances limited. State receptions adjusted.
It wasn't a firing. You can't really fire a queen without triggering a massive constitutional crisis. But it was controlled distancing. She was effectively put in a silo.
And simultaneously, the Waleses, William and Catherine, are pulled in closer. But the report mentions something very specific about how they were pulled in. It talks about the red boxes.
This is the key to the whole shift. The red boxes are the literal leather boxes that contain the state papers. Intelligence briefings, government documents, laws requiring signature. They go to the monarch every single day.
And the source implies?
The source states that security briefings began reaching Prince William first.
Before dawn.
Before dawn. Before they even reached the king.
That seems like a massive constitutional shift. Does that normally happen?
It is highly irregular. It implies that William isn't just waiting for his father to tell him what to do. He is processing the intelligence in real time. He is filtering it. He is operating as a partner, or perhaps even a gatekeeper.
That is basically a co-presidency, or a co-monarchy.
It is a functional regency without the legal title. It is a quiet acknowledgement that while Charles holds the physical crown, William is holding the reins of the state.
And looking at Catherine's role in this new setup, the source uses that phrase, warmth without softness.
I flagged that phrase too. It is an incredibly important distinction. Softness implies passivity. Warmth is a strategic tool.
So she is not just the nice mom waving at the crowds.
No, not at all. She became the strategist. The source suggests she stepped beyond ceremony to actively shape the public messaging. She provided the quiet reassurance the public needed during this weird transition.
While the men were handling the red boxes and the mechanics of state, she was managing the emotional connection with the public.
Exactly. She became the face of stability.
So we have the incident at the Abbey and then this major reshuffle of power. But the report also mentions a quiet purge regarding the staff.
Yes. You can't change the direction of a massive ship, like the Monarchy, if the crew is still steering the old way.
Who got the boot?
Advisors who were loyal to Camilla's specific way of doing things, the ones who perhaps encouraged that bid for relevance we talked about earlier, they were quietly rotated out.
And replaced by?
The Kensington Palace team. Younger, sharper minds aligned entirely with William and Catherine. The source says the center of gravity undeniably shifted to their court.
You know, usually when we hear about royal family drama, it is painted as this huge burden on the monarch. It is stressful. But the source says something really surprising about King Charles's state of mind after all this reshuffling. It says he appeared visibly lighter.
That is the most human part of this entire deep dive for me. Think about Charles for a second. He waited 70 years to be king. He has spent his entire life worrying about the succession, about whether William was ready, about the sheer survival of the institution.
And this incident, this potential disaster in the Abbey, proved something to him.
It proved that William was ready. William stood still when it mattered most. He didn't crack. Catherine didn't crack.
Right.
In that moment of complete chaos, Charles saw that the institution was actually safe in their hands.
So he prioritized the stability of the outcome over his own personal control.
Exactly. He realized he could finally let go.
Yeah.
He didn't have to micromanage every single detail anymore because the next generation had the discipline to hold the line.
And the public felt it too, right? The polls mentioned in the report showed renewed confidence almost immediately.
The narrative shifted overnight. It went from the king is sick and the family is fractured to the partnership is strong.
The media completely shifted gears. They stopped talking about the division and started praising the functional partnership. Charles provides the authority of the title and William provides the executive leadership.
It really describes a modernized monarchy. It feels less like the divine right of kings and more like a corporate executive team.
That is the perfect analogy. The firm, as they call themselves behind closed doors, became an actual firm. It shifted from a singular mystical sovereign to a working executive committee.
Yes.
So let's recap this journey for you. We started with a blessing service that was supposed to be completely routine. It went wrong because one person tried to rewrite the script to gain relevance.
And in doing so, she accelerated her own obsolescence.
The king pivots. He physically and operationally excludes the source of the friction. He elevates the heirs, and we end up with this totally new model of governance.
A model built on shared burden rather than solo rule.
The final image the source leaves us with is the abbey after the crowds have left, just the ancient stones. It says they witnessed a transfer of moral authority without a single speech being made.
It brings us right back to that idea of silence. We live in a very noisy world. We think power is about who is shouting the loudest or who is trending or who walks the fastest.
Right.
But in this institution, and maybe in history, generally the loudest person usually loses. The power was secured by the people who stood completely still.
It really challenges the way we think about history. We always look for the big speeches, the battles, the grand declarations. But this suggests the real turning points happen in the quiet moments.
The moments between the breaths. The moments where you decide not to react.
So here is the provocative question I want to leave you with today. We have described a king who has effectively handed over the weight of the crown, the decision-making, the intelligence, the day-to-day operations while keeping the title. If that is the case, what is the definition of monarchy in the 21st century?
Are we seeing the end of the era of the singular sovereign? Are we moving into an era where the crown is just a collective?
A corporate board?
And if power is something you always have to take,
Mm-hmm.
did William and Catherine take it? Or was it simply the only thing left to do when those doors swung open?
Power is often taken, not given. But sometimes it is just about being the last one standing when the music stops.
Or the only one sitting still when everyone else is running?
A lot to think about. From a fractured silence in Westminster Abbey to a completely new operational model for one of the world's oldest institutions.
It was a fascinating deep dive.
Thank you for guiding us through the nuance of what could have just been a tabloid story, but turned out to be a massive constitutional pivot point.
My pleasure. It is always interesting to see how the sausage, or in this case, the sovereignty, is made.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one. Until then, watch the quiet moments. They usually tell the real story.